Well, imagine having a poll lead so vast, your manifesto can boast £2.5 billion in spare tax rises that you haven't spent. Well, that was Keir Starmer's gambit, his closest thing to the surprise the rabbits he detests, as Labour's leader launched an offer to British voters that he hopes won't upset his 23-point poll lead over the Tories. With Labour out of power for 14 years, the party has spent years working up to its policy offer in a grinding internal bureaucracy. As a result, the 136-page manifesto is packed with policy. Here are the details. As the UK polls race inches closer to its final showdown, the Labour Party released its election manifesto with the promise to rebuild the country, ending what party leader Keir Starmer called an era of gestures and gimmicks.
This changed Labour Party has a plan for growth. We are pro-business and pro-worker, the party of wealth creation. We will reform the planning rules, a choice ignored for 14 years, and build the homes and infrastructure you need. We will level up your rights at work, a choice ignored for 14 years, and raise your wages and your security.
From wealth creation for the working class, new border and security command to pledging to recognizing Palestine as a state, the manifesto has it all. Central to Labour's pitch is wealth creation through increased investment to help improve the living standards of working people. Labour has also unveiled plans to hike taxes by £8.6 billion through raids on private schools, overseas property investors to pay more for NHS appointments and more. Doing away with Tories' Rwanda scheme, Labour aims to build a new border and security command to stop smuggling of all illegal migrants. Unlike the Conservative Party, Labour's biggest spending commitment is the £23.7 billion for green measures. That is because green policies are at the heart of the party's plans for growth and prosperity, as well as climate. Lastly, Keir Starmer has also pledged to reduce wait times at the doctors by creating an extra 40,000 appointments a year by introducing more weekend services. With many big-ticket reforms on its manifesto, Labour is all set to take on the Conservatives at the UK polls on the 4th of July. With Disha Bagchi, Parmeshwar Bava for NDTV.
Two manifestos this week, and there's a clear choice at this election. We published a manifesto that's going to cut taxes for people in this country, and the Labour manifesto that was published today made it clear that taxes are going to rise. Multiple independent sources demonstrate that the tax burden under Labour will rise to the highest levels in history. And in contrast, if I'm re-elected, we will cut taxes for people at every stage of their life, cutting taxes for people in work, cutting tax for people who are self-employed, cutting tax for people who are buying their first home, cutting tax for pensioners and cutting taxes for families. That's the type of country I want to believe.
Well, for further clarity from Ground Zero, we have with us former BBC editor Nicholas Nugent. Thanks so much, Nick, for joining us. Now that both the major parties in the UK have set out their manifestos ahead of the general election, talk to us about how the two manifestos and their promises stack up.
Well, one of the noticeable things about this election is that the key differences, as you put it, have diminished, because Labour, which used to be the party of high spending on welfare, is now preaching the same philosophy as the Conservatives about growing the economy. In other words, it's adopting the philosophy that you can't spend more on health or welfare or education unless your economy is expanding and there is more scope for bringing in revenue.
But Nick, Labour has unveiled £8.6 million of tax rises by 2028-2029, with raids on private schools, overseas property investors and non-doms. The manifesto reiterates Labour's promise not to raise national insurance, income tax or VAT, but the Conservatives meanwhile have offered a variety of tax cuts. Which plan does the British public seem to lean towards as things stand today?
Well, yes, but they have ruled out raising all the key taxes. That's to say income tax, national insurance, VAT. Those are the key taxes that affect everybody. So Labour Party reckon they're going to raise their tax by selective measures, raising VAT on private schooling. So that's a vote for equalization within society, not giving the same privilege to those who can afford expensive schools. And secondly, to tax the oil and gas industry, because once again, that brings in a lot of revenue, but it also helps the climate change policy of reducing dependence on oil and gas, and various other sort of small tax changes, or indeed trying to prevent tax evasion, trying to tighten the rules. So no government is going to win, or no party is going to win this election by putting up what we normally think of as personal taxes, the taxes that affect most people. So they have to find other ways of doing it, other ways of raising the revenue that they're going to need if they are going to succeed in, for example, reducing the waiting lists in the National Health Service, which is something that both parties have put high up in their priorities.
Well, as we wrap, Nick, Nigel Farage's return. Is it turbulence for the Tories? As per the latest numbers, Reform UK has overtaken the Conservatives in a YouGov poll for the first time.
The only significance of Reform is how much they damage the Conservative Party, because they're not going to take votes from anyone except the Conservative Party. It's very unlikely they'd take votes from anyone else. So the Conservative Party, already in a difficult condition, will have its number of seats reduced by the performance of Reform. Reform may not get many members of Parliament, a handful at the most, possibly not even that, but they will, in our first past the post system, take away votes from the Conservatives. And the Conservatives know this. So that's why yesterday they started talking, trying to worry their traditional voters and say, if you vote for Reform, that's a vote for the Labour Party, and you could put the Labour Party in power for 10 years. So they are reacting to this, quite honestly, very real threat to the numbers of MPs elected for the Conservative Party by introducing an element of fear that it'll put Labour Party, the traditional socialists, I might say, into power for many years. But I don't see the Labour Party as being very socialist at all these days, because they want to grow the economy more than anything.